Oh, and this runs in Yuma now. I don't know if I told you that.
Okay.
It's on our Yuma station, too.
Okay, so I'll make sure I keep it northeast.
Yes, northeast Colorado, yeah. And welcome back into Crosstalk here on this Monday morning edition of the program. We continue our series, our ongoing series on small business development. And we're joined again this week by Laurie Jones. She is from the SBDC here in Sterling, but serving all of Northeast Colorado. Laurie, thank you for continuing to do this. This is always fun discussions to have.
You're welcome. And how are you today, Ben?
You know, it's another great day. You got to enjoy the day.
That's right.
You don't go in with a positive attitude, it's not going to be a positive day.
That's true.
Let everybody you have to deal with ruin your positive attitude. Don't ruin theirs as we come in. We have another series of conversations we want to have over the next few weeks about business and making decisions. I guess would be the overall theme of the next 3 weeks with you. And I want to start with leaving business. Now, I know that's completely backwards from what you normally do, but sometimes, some generations, especially people that are looking to retire or looking to move or looking to get into something new, want to leave business. And that sometimes is the hardest decision you can make, even harder than getting into business.
And, I guess the leaving the business, sometimes you may hear a term called exit strategy. Mm-hmm. So the idea of that is, and again, to put it back into perspective for the listeners that aren't familiar with the SBDC, that stands for Small Business Development mm-hmm. Center, and we do have centers, of course, they're across the United States, but we have several of us are based in Northeast Colorado as well. And one of the trends that I'm starting to see is both of that exit strategy, which means if you are the owner of a business, you're starting to think about either as you approach a number of years that you've owned that business, you're thinking, okay, who's next? Mm-hmm. Will it be a family member that's going to take over from me? Many, many businesses in Northeast Colorado are family kinds of businesses, mm-hmm. multi-generational, but oftentimes maybe there isn't a family member that wants to take it over. And rather than literally shutting the doors down, I've been working with a number of businesses that are saying, I would like to sell.
Right.
And so that's one strategy. But on the other side, besides being the seller, on the buying side, same thing. I am seeing, and maybe it's the economy getting a little mm-hmm. better, I am seeing people that either due to the downturn, they did not continue to have full-time employment, so they're starting to seek out opportunities.
Right.
So again, what I'm trying to say to anyone listening out there is if you are thinking through an exit strategy, the nice thing is there's people out there now starting to say, hey, I would like to own my own business. So the real question is, how do I do this? When do I do this? And what's it all about?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just as many decisions go into starting the business, which we've talked about before in our conversations, there are just as many decisions for leaving.
Right.
When you run your own business, you become personally invested. Mm-hmm. And it's like sending your kid off to college. You no longer would have control of your business. So there are some very important decisions to look at when trying to put your exit strategy together as the owner of the business.
And, I think the number one thing is if you are an owner now mm-hmm. and you're thinking of selling, and again, no matter what the size of the business is, generally there's going to be someone on the buying side that's willing to step in and take it over. Mm-hmm. And it can't be something that happens in a few months.
Right.
Most of the time, what we recommend is if you're on the selling side, give yourself a year to 2 years. Set that time frame and say, here's the date that I want this to happen. And then you work your way backwards. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's business brokers out there. Sometimes these deals can be done person to person using attorneys mm-hmm. Because there are going to be some agreements. But the number one thing that I would recommend if you're on the selling side is make sure that you have got a package of information together that describes what the business is, some of the history of the business, the key suppliers, and it's going to be things that a new buyer, just like buying a home, is going to need to do some due diligence on.
We're talking with Laurie Jones from the SBDC, and today's topic is exit strategy on our small business discussion series. And obviously, this helps you have a connection to the new owner in that you're helping them learn how to do it. Because even if you've been in the business and possibly even working for the business, you did mention that at the beginning, and are going to be taking it over, there are things you just don't know.
That's right.
And that, as a part of the exit strategy, is something very important to have together. Another big part of the exit strategy is money.
Right. Because
when you're selling the business, you've put a lot into it. And I'm going to say right now that every owner out there is never going to get, quote unquote, enough money for what they put into this business that they founded, because you can't really account for the time, the blood, sweat, and tears it took to put this together. But pricing the business is very important for your exit strategy as well.
And you've made a great point. And I have sold my own businesses before, and I've been involved in helping other people sell businesses. And probably if there's one thing to be thinking about, it's called the valuation of the business. Mm-hmm. And the valuation is going to depend on a couple of factors. Number one, what's a common value, or what does the industry see as that value? And that's the number one factor to consider. The second one is whether you, as the seller, whether you want to be paid up front, later on. These are going to be other things, but putting a number around this is the value. It's the same thing like in real estate. What's the market value of this? So you have to look at that market value, and one of the valuation methods is called net present value.
Okay.
And I won't go through the specifics.
Because you need a degree and a doctorate
you
in
don't
accounting?
need, yeah, sometimes, and I know Ben here, he just doesn't love numbers the way that maybe I love numbers. But the concept is, it's a way to take the cash flow of the business.
Okay.
And generally, it goes forward 5 years. So you estimate not just the income, but you look at what kind of cash is left at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And then there's what's called a discount method. And the idea behind this is to value the business in today's dollars, but knowing that it's going to go over a 5-year period. So when the transaction happens, the buyer pays the business owner in today's dollars. So it's called net present value. Other kinds of acquisitions are off of assets, and that's another way. Sometimes if you buy a business, and this is an important decision on the seller's side and the buyer's side, when you sell it, does that mean that the new buyer inherits the debts and inherits the accounts payable and inherits you can't transfer a mortgage from a business to a business, but essentially there may need to be a mortgage on the real estate involved. On the positive side would be the assets.
Right.
And so an asset acquisition means that the seller only sells the assets, the real estate, the customers, the accounts receivable, and then there's the relationships with, again, the long-term suppliers, et cetera. And depending on which side of the equation you're on, it can make a lot of sense, because an asset acquisition is what we would call a lot cleaner to do. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit easier. But again, establishing that value, having myself sold a business many years ago, and now today seeing the value of that business.
Right.
Sometimes I wonder if I sold it at too little of an amount, but I think all sellers are going to think that way.
All sellers are going to think that they're getting too little, and all buyers are going to think they're paying too much.
Right. So again, with what the seller needs to do to start preparing and thinking about this is, whether they do their accounting or they work with their bookkeepers, they need to know, what is the value of my balance sheet? What are my assets? What's my account receivables look like? If you have inventory, what's the value of the inventory? Do I have equipment to either manufacture a product or equipment to do the work that is is needed in this area. So being able to document all that, attach some values to all of that, helps again create on the seller side. Now, if you're the buyer, when you are seriously investigating buying somebody else's business, buyers need to learn that they probably have to sign confidentiality statements. Then they should be privy to looking at financial records at least over the last 3 years, knowing if there's any lawsuits or any other litigation out there, knowing about the good and the bad related to the customers, and if they're not from that industry, at least, again, learning more and getting the perspective and the value of what that business really means in the community.
We're talking with Laurie Jones from the SBDC on Crosstalk, our continuing small business series where we talk about several different topics. We've talked about improving your business, and today exit strategy is our topic. I know you're looking long time forward, but for some businesses, it's happening today. And exit strategy, obviously, it's very important to know who you're selling it to and that you're selling it at the right price. But I think an important part of the exit strategy is knowing what you're going to do with yourself when you're out of the business.
Oh, and that gets into the same area of anyone wanting to retire. I think the good advice is, okay, now I've sold my business, now what do I do? And in many instances, this can be part of the buy-sell agreements, which is a legal agreement. Sometimes the previous owner is allowed to stay on, asked to stay on, and there is sometimes a good relationship. It can be a bit of a mentor so that the transition to customers, suppliers, community members, you've got a nice way to transition. In other situations, which by the way, it's kind of like putting off buying a certain kind of insurance. If you haven't ever thought about what happens if something happens to me and I'm the owner of this business, it's a good time to think about that as well.
It definitely is.
Because you just never know what can happen.
Well, and especially since we're talking about age as well, and part of this conversation comes from a baby boomer generation of owners that are retiring, you also need to look at in the sale, making sure that things are in place that if owner A dies, what happens with the transaction if it is an overtime transaction. That's another very important thing you have to have. It's almost like a will, except for your business.
Yeah, and actually there is, it's not used often, and excuse the term, but it's called key man insurance. There's actually insurance that business owners can get, so if something happens to them, there is money or there's funding that can come in, and it can happen through life insurance too, that allows the business to keep operating so that, if the assets are tied up literally in probate or something like that, there's money to keep the business going through that insurance policy. So a whole host of these things, and all of us like to think this is never going to happen. And of course, then we can document and talk about, yeah, it's happened to so-and-so and so-and-so. But again, on the exit strategy, if you are creating a brand new business, this is the other side. Establish some sort of these are the milestones that I would want to sell the business at. Maybe it's a dollar value, maybe it's having done it for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but make sure you just have that sense of when it's going to happen, and then you just have a plan. And I think with a plan, everything works better.
It definitely does. I was not one to business plan until I met Laurie, and now I've started carrying a yellow legal pad around and writing down notes.
That's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Laurie, at the SBDC, you guys do wonderful work with local businesses. How can they get in touch with you?
Again, the Small Business Development Center, SBDC. I am personally based here in Sterling, and we're at 213 Main Street, which is the Logan County Economic Development Office. My cell phone number is area code 970-520-0798. And for those of you that are outside this area, we also have several other consultants in Northeast Colorado. So a good way to see who is in your area is to go to our website. And the name of it is NECO SBDC. But if you type the website, NEECCO SBDC.org, that will bring you to our website, and we list all of our consultants.
It's Northeast and East Central Colorado,
Yes.
so it's not just a limited area. It's all over the region. And if you happen to pick this up on our podcast online as well, there's SBDCs all across the state
That's
and the
right.
U.S.
And again, our primary focus, number one, before our focus, our price is free. It does not cost you anything
Right.
to work with us. We are funded. We are a nonprofit. We are funded from various sources, including the Small Business Administration. But what we offer is business consulting for existing businesses. We can help on strategies, managing employees, looking at issues that are pertinent to your business, and we bring in expertise for that. We also do seminars. We have online resources, and we, as a third thing, can help connect you to different financing options for your business. And if you're a startup, bring your business idea into me. I'd love to hear what it is.
You just look at Big Time, Small Town Media, and you can see what the SBDC can do for a
Thank you.
startup business. Laurie, thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome.